Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rich, Simple, Human. I, as you already know, am Lindsay Francis, leadership, psychologist, sophrologist, and all things behaviour change expert. And today I've got somebody very well behaved on the show, I'm hoping, Stephen Puri. Welcome to the show. Stephen, I'm going to give you a quick intro in a minute.
I'd just like to add, we're both topless. I don't know if this is really well behaved. And I hope people are scrambling for their phones right now going like, hold on, there's video. What?
There is video, and do try and watch the video on this one because I think it's going to be great. Stephen and I are off to a flying start because we've got loads and loads of exciting things to talk about. We are both on a mission to be useful to you, so this episode is going to be filled with nuggets of information that will hopefully change your life. Stephen, you are a speaker, producer and founder of the Sukha community, and you are sitting today in Austin, Texas, as I am talking to you from
All of the
France.
above. Check.
Thank you very much. Would you like to add anything to that introduction so people can hear a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
You know what? As you said, I hope this is both an engaging and entertaining episode as well as an educational and actionable one. So let us endeavor to be helpful. I'm not a carpenter or a plumber, so I can't be helpful with those things, but I can help with mindful productivity, flow states, how to, realize the thing you need to realize in a distracted.
Amazing. I am in the middle of some research, Stephen, and I will tell you that every single research candidate has told me they are feeling distracted and overwhelmed, and it's getting worse. Why do you think that is?
There's a lot of ADD, which stands for attention to, hey, what are you eating? So let's I get asked to speak a lot about distraction, about how to block distractions and focus. Let me begin with a more foundational thought just to kind of set the table for us, which is, why does it matter if you're distracted, right? Implicit in you're being distracted is that there's something else you should be doing, right? From which you're being distracted. So if we want to acknowledge that the problem of distraction becomes important only if you think there's something that is worth doing, right? And that, I think, is going to be the foundation of what we talk about, which is if you as an individual or you as a leader of a team believe that you or your people have something great inside them, then it's really about, in this lifetime, how do you get that thing out? Whether it is the next great American novel, whether it is an amazing restaurant concept, whether it is an app or a tech company, or God knows, a romantic comedy movie, or whatever that thing may be, how do you not take that to your grave? Or if you are a leader, how do you elicit that great thing out of each person on your team? That is why distraction is important. How do you manage distractions? Fair?
I think that's a great example. And when you were talking then, Stephen, I was just thinking about the times when I enjoy actually being distracted because I reframe it as a sort of curious wonder. I'm distracted because I've suddenly started looking at my dog who's sitting on the floor. I was distracted because suddenly I got totally into something I was reading on the internet about sourdough. I like being distracted sometimes.
There are many great reasons to wander through the woods without a direction, right? The things you discover. Not great if, your wife's giving birth and you really need to find the hospital, right? Don't go wandering through the woods. So you have a purpose, have a baby, which, as you know, is very germane because I have an 8-week-old son downstairs and I adore him so much. Yeah, 3 times a day I think about eating can be so adorable. So that said, let me ask you this. When you do have something you need to do because you have clients who need, you to do research, to do thought for them, you have a number of purposeful things to do. When you're doing that, what are the distractions that pull you away from that purpose? And I can go first. If you want me to be vulnerable first, I can do that. It's up to you.
Yeah, I'd love you to go first, please.
Absolutely. There are 2 things that really get me. I'll be working, and my life right now is I run a community online of focused people called, the Sukha. So a lot of what I do is write code, engineering, or do some sort of content, like write blog posts, write, articles, things like that. So I find that my number one thing is when I hit something frustrating, the build keeps failing for this feature I'm trying to write. I've reread the first 2 paragraphs of the blog post and they're just, the muses are not singing today. Without thinking, my muscle memory will just have my hand reach for my phone and think, oh, let's just see who WhatsApped. What's Eric doing in Paris right now? Maybe he reached back out. And it's amazing in that it is this zero effort dopamine addiction where I'm like, oh, well, I could just for a moment check my text messages, my WhatsApp, my email, whatever that thing is. And it's never a moment. It's a rabbit hole because that phone is perfectly designed how it vibrates, how it sounds, how the notifications look to suck you in and keep you there, right? So phone, number one distraction. With every audience that I speak to, when I do that poll of like, what distracts you? Phone is always number one, right? It's beautifully designed if you consider the purpose being to not actually get. The second thing is this. It's YouTube. And the way it happens for me is I will be, for example, coding something and there's a React feature that I'm trying to figure out how to use. And some wonderful engineer has made a video where in 3 minutes, he or she lays out, here's how to get this, open source little library thing to work. I will watch that for 2 minutes, 50 seconds. And in the last few seconds, YouTube says, Stephen, while you're here, here's some things you would love. And they know me so well. Here's a great crispy salmon recipe for you. Oh, here is something on the avionics of the A380. And I'll be like, oh, I do love aviation. And that turns from 3 minutes, that turns into 20, 30 minutes of like, well, I guess I could watch that really quickly, right? So YouTube, phone, big time sucks for me. I had to admit that to myself, like any 12-step program going, I have a problem. And, awareness, I think, is part of, as you would say, you can't cure something if you're not aware.
No, consciousness is key. We can't manage what we can't or we
Okay,
don't measure.
I've been vulnerable now. Answer the question yourself, Lindsay.
I am going to add to the distraction food, actually.
Ooh.
I've just had nearly 3 weeks away with no phone, actually, which has been an amazing experience. That's
Great.
for another conversation. But my phone, of course, Instagram for me is wonderful. I'm in a sourdough era. So if I find a sourdough recipe, boom, the time is gone. Like with the crispy salmon, I'm now thinking, what can I make? But I will often think, oh, this blog post, this workbook I'm writing, this piece of research I'm doing, or this analysis I'm doing for a client is a bit tricky or not going as I wanted. What shall I eat or drink? So I will be immediately thinking about feeding myself. So I can consume, I train very hard. I ride a road bike, Tour de France, Etape style. I train a lot, but I eat a lot and I like eating. It's a great pleasure in life. I once tried some Ozempic. Well, what was I going to do all day if I didn't need to eat? It kind of defeated the purpose of being alive. Didn't last very long. So that's the problem with food and Instagram. And I will tell you that I spend a lot of time checking my Whoop app because, as you know, I track all my clients with Whoop. And it's not designed to be addictive, but keep sneaking into the data and thinking, well, how long was I asleep last night? Maybe the reason my brain isn't working is because I didn't have enough REM sleep. Maybe it was because I had 4 sleep cycles and not 5 that I'd normally like. Perhaps it's because my resting heart rate has gone up from 48 to 51. Maybe that's
cardio, less Pilates.
Exactly. So yes, those are my guilty pleasures. But I also have trained myself to ask myself the question, what was I meant to be doing? In the same way we say to the dog, sit before we give him a treat, I've trained myself to say, what were you meant to be doing? And then I bring myself back to focus.
Okay. You're going to laugh, and this is going to sound somewhat self-serving, but I have to tell you how aligned we are. So in building Sukha, which is, the community, the flow state app that we built, I had that question, that conversation with myself about what would it take for me to finish sooner in the day, like to have more of the day intentionally spent and less of the day sprawling through things, right? And I thought to myself, it's going to sound kind of funny, if I had a friend sitting next to me and when I reached for my phone, they just simply said, Stephen, is that going to get you out of here at 3? When I opened the YouTube video and I clicked on the A380 video, I clicked on the crispy skin salmon thing, I'm not an idiot. This is the thing. I'm not like 3,000 pounds sitting in front of the fridge just consuming in a gluttonous way. If I just had a friend say like, hey man, I know that video looks cool. Are you sure? That would be enough for me to say, oh, you're right. Yeah, I would rather at 3 o'clock be playing with my kid. I'll actually tell you a funny story about why I named the company Sukha, but it's around that idea. And that's what we designed. Really simple. Because the community we have is really for like high performing people. It's not for screw ups who are just trying to get control in their life. It's for people who are going like, I'm doing pretty well, but I know I could really optimize this and like either do better work in a more focused way, do the same amount of work in less amount of time, that sort of thing. So we built the simplest thing. Like when you start a session in Sukha, you have a QR code that comes up. You can tap with your phone. If I touch my phone during my session, the smart assistant in my laptop just says, hey, Steven, I see you're on phone. Is that helping you? And it just gives me that one moment to go, who do I want to be? And that's all I needed. You know, it's not like going on, The Biggest Loser or something on television, 7 coaches and 13 regimens. It's just that little thing of going like, hey, you're smart. I know distractions are beautifully designed, but do you want to fall victim or not? Your choice. And I go, thank you.
Choice and conscious change. It sounds absolutely beautiful.
It sounds familiar to your listeners.
My listeners are all
asking. We didn't coordinate this. This is absolutely authentic. We just happen to be aligned. I'm not throwing softballs down the middle here, but go on.
That also, I'm going to skip on to another conversation really about control, because you and I have come together today in a very organic, natural, anointed way, you could say. We're having this conversation, we're putting it out into the public domain, and we're hoping that it's helpful to people because we have experienced this ourselves and we know what has worked or what hasn't worked for us. I'm just in the middle of reading a very interesting book, and it's talking about the fact that we believe that we can control the outcomes. So therefore we believe that if we put in more effort and more control, we can create more outcomes. And of course, we know that simply isn't true. So here we are today, a living example of no control, no contrived outcome, no grinding or striving. We're just here letting it emerge.
Can I push back on that a little bit?
Please do.
I do think, I'll tell you this. When I was coming up, I was lucky to go to the Center for Creative Leadership and be exposed to those ideas when I was in a very formative state. Not as, you're vice president of a studio, you think you're smarter than you are, but a state of like, I aspire to be, a senior executive at a film studio. One of the things they addressed is they said, you're in this room because whatever, so-and-so, of course, has chosen you as a potential leader of the future. And you believe that there is this correlation between you applying your smarts because you know you're smart and you know you're diligent and you know you're clever, and the outcome. And they wanted to disabuse us of that notion, which when you are a type A plus personality and you're, in your 20s, whatever, you're like, absolutely not. That is totally the secret to success, right? And what I would offer is this, I don't necessarily disagree with them, but I do want to qualify what you said, which is there are huge benefits to focusing on the inputs you control. How shall I work? How mindful shall I be? When shall I work? How well do I know my chronotype? And we'll talk about some of these things. And the more you can dissociate yourself from, and I'm controlling the outcome, because there are many variables, this multivariable equation that is the thing you want to happen, then you can be happy, but also know you're doing great things. Like that, I think, is a really important distinction, because we're not telling high performers, hey, man, don't really try because you can't control the outcome. It is rather control the inputs, do a fantastic job, do it in a focused way, do it at the highest level possible. And hopefully the outcome will be what you want, but you will know you did your best.
I totally agree. And I think to quantify, you and I are always only working with high performers. The key here is the conscious piece. What are the inputs I can control? And where do I have effective power? Where do I have
pick up on the chronotype thing from a second ago? Can I talk about that?
Please do.
I know there's some concepts. I know there's a cohort of your audience that's like, I know everything about everything, which is amazing. And there are probably some that are like, we should unpack a little bit some of these ideas, right? Let me tell you, my first brush with chronotype, which is the concept there are times of day you're more adept at certain kinds of things, right? I was a young punk coming up in film, and there was a famous screenwriter far above my station, Ron Bass, who had written Rain Man and My Best Friend's Wedding and like all these things, right? He was infamous because he would not talk to his family in the morning. Like not a hello, good morning, not a who wants pancakes, not a who needs a ride to school. Like wouldn't talk to them. And he said to them, listen, when I start talking to you, I can no longer hear my character voices in my head. So I have to use that time from 5, 6 in the morning to like 9, 10 in the morning to write that. Now, given this is a guy who wrote the words that would get a Julia Roberts or a Tom Cruise or a Dustin Hoffman to say yes to his script over the $30 million offers, that are on their desk, right? So his family, of course, is like, hey, Dad, you're making $2 million a script. Like, take the morning for you. We can make the pancakes, right? Now, he was intimately aware of his chronotype. In the afternoon, he's like, I'll do studio meetings, collabs with other writers, whatever we need to do then, right? And I remember learning about this, and I was like, that is fascinating that he is that clear on this is how my brain works. As people apply this in their lives, because it is not hard to figure out your chronotype. You can simply take a piece of paper and a pencil. You don't have to buy anything from anybody to measure anything, right? Draw a simple grid, Monday through Friday, morning, afternoon, and for a week or two, jot down roughly at a high level what you did. Oh, I had to write blog posts on Tuesday morning. Oh, I had to do this thing on Wednesday afternoon, blah, 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 right? And after each one, put a little smiley or a frowny face. I'm telling you, you look at that after 5 to 10 days, you will see your patterns. You'll go, why? Why am I trying to create things in the afternoon when I'm always happiest creating in the morning? Why am I not happier, scheduling all interactive things in the afternoon? Because I love doing that, but I hate doing it at 9 a.m. Like that sort of thing. You see those patterns and you start to schedule yourself properly for your chronotype. That was what I meant as an offhand comment before.
Can I just ask, is this something that gets discussed in the community, Stephen, as a very, very powerful tool for performance optimization?
Well, in our Sukha community, it attracts people who are kind of interested in high performance. So you do see the rhythms. Like one of the things I love is, and it's going to sound a little kooky, but I'm going to tell you, when we originally built this, it was like a single player game. It was, there's been great research on flow states. Let us help you with scientifically designed flow music, Pomodoro timer, trackers. You get feedback. You know how important, feedback is, right? So we did this. And then I thought to myself after a while, there's like a weird hub and spoke thing where I know so many members because I'm the founder, but none of them had any sense of each other even existing because it's like a single player game. It's like playing Pac-Man from the old days, right? You didn't know it. There was anyone else in the world playing Pac-Man. And I thought, would it be interesting or distracting if people had a sense of each other, like community? So I asked a couple of members, could they talk to me? I want to bounce my idea off them. Did this. And one woman I spoke to, who's still a member, I did this thing, is this distracting if there are other people and there's a way to like chat with each other or know what each other are working on? And she stopped me. She said, Stephen, I can go to the Nike store. I can buy a pair of shoes. They will sell me a left shoe and a right shoe. I put them on my feet. They run, they work. There's a reason why 100 million people belong to the Nike Run Club. Because you run further and faster. And the days you suck and you're on the sofa and your friends come by to pick you up, it feels great. And the day when you do that for one of your friends who's having a sucky day, feels even better. She's like, you should do it. I will tell you this. It is now one of my favorite things in the app is that there is a place to say, this is what I'm working on. People ask you about, I launched my website. Oh, post a URL to that. That sort of feeling of whether you're talking about Strava, whether you're talking about, there's some fantastic apps about doing things together. In fact, I think Strava's IPOing this year. So there are incredible benefits to, like you said, being part of a community. And yes, we do talk about things like chronotype, and you see the rhythms of the day of like who's online at what time, because there are copywriters in Europe who are doing, I happen to know they're doing this thing. There are a bunch of developers in Asia. They're on at a different time of day. And it's sort of fascinating to see the rhythms. Back to you in the studio.
I think this is a very important conversation because you may or may not be aware of the work of Arthur Brooks, who's talking about the sort of way we age and the way our brain is changing. And when we stop trying to grind at the same pace or race at the same pace, and then we hit the grind, we can really transform the way that we behave sort of post 45, 50. I've noticed for myself that chronotype really becoming so much more important.
What is your chronotype?
Well, you're going to forgive me because it's not, is there a specific term?
No, I'm sorry. What I mean is you recognize your rhythms during the day, and when you're more adept at different things, what are they for you?
Yeah, so morning is ultimate creativity and high energy, afternoon disastrous. My brain, you remember the days at university where you could stay up and study all night, you just had, a few drinks or a few packets of cigarettes. I went back to further study as an adult. That's when I realized I needed to know my chronotype. Because if you didn't front load your day and get it done in your optimal productivity hours up front for
Yes.
me, I'm done for in the day. So my brain is done by 5 o'clock. You're lucky we're just ahead of that window today in my time zone. But there are some softer things that can be done in the afternoon, that sort of paper shuffling, the sort of organization, the to-do lists, the things that aren't so this doesn't help you, of course, when you've got babies or teenagers, because my teenagers come alive, and I don't know if you know the evolutionary reason for this, but they come alive at sort of 11 o'clock at night. When we were living as tribal beings and the older people went to bed, the younger people stayed up later, as you know, to look after the tribe, but also to practice socializing alone. So they had this special time, that sort of 10 till 2 window, 10 at night, 2 in the morning, where they were doing their socializing. They then start to go to bed in the tribe, the teenagers, as the babies begin to wake up, and then the parents are awake, and then the older people obviously appear. Older people wake up in the night as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we're massively generalizing here. But this is fascinating work. And when we can apply these rhythms, and we can also talk about these sorts of things in marriage, men and female dynamics, what was happening in the tribal times, we're not that domesticated.
I will tell you an epic fail that I had. As I think you know, I started out as an engineer and I got into film because film became digital. So suddenly I was at that nexus of I can speak engineer, I can speak creative. There's a lot of demand in that little part of the Venn diagram, right? When I hit a moment, this is probably after Die Hard 5, Wolverine, where I was just like, the movies I'm working on are just sequels, prequels, remakes, terrible stuff, right? And that was all my studio wanted to make. I was like, you know what? I think this part of my life is done. It doesn't feel like I have more to do here. I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. What else do I know how to do? Well, engineering. So that's why I went to go create a company where engineering could help be a solution, right? So I bought into the idea. A lot of my friends in the Valley, Silicon Valley, we're very much part of the, if you're a true developer, you're, coding until 3, 4 in the morning in the darkness and the quiet. And this is also when like microdosing psilocybin and LSD were very popular in the Valley like 10 years ago, right? And so I bought into that. I was like, oh, that's what I need to do to get in that rhythm. Can I tell you, I did it, but I would invariably find that the code that I was writing in those hours was never optimal. It was always that portion of the code to be like, I should go back and rewrite that because that's kind of a hacky way to do this, right? As opposed to the morning code would be stuff where I'm like, that's actually, yeah, that's good. That's bulletproof. Like that's hardened. That would work. And that was something I had to admit to myself going, I'm not that chronotype. Maybe I was in college or something. And that was one of 2 big revelations I had about this is stupid what I'm doing. The other one was really how I discovered flow states, which I know you wanted to talk about. Should we just go into that for the hell of it?
Yes, please. I'm desperate for you to explain to listeners from the beginning.
This is great. This is the best interview ever. Anyone who's desperate for what I happen to know. So here's the funny thing. I did not know the term flow state. I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it. I was flying from Austin to San Francisco, where the next morning I had a meeting with my team. And there was an idea I had for a feature. And I thought, you know what? On the flight, I'm going to mock up in Figma kind of a, my own rough version of it to present tomorrow. See if I can, rally some enthusiasm to build this thing. So get on the flight. Alaska runs that nonstop route. And the captain's like, hey, kids, sorry, Wi-Fi's out, see you in SF. We take off. 15, 20 minutes later, we start to descend. And I'm like, oh, we're descending in Dallas. Like something's wrong with the plane. They're going to tell us when we're on the ground. Oh, the hydraulic system, whatever, will get you a new plane. Right? I looked at my MacBook. 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by. I had no concept of it. I couldn't tell you if the drink cart came by. I couldn't tell you the name of the fat guy in the seat next to me. I knew nothing. And I was like, what happened? But my designs were done and I liked them. And I don't know if you've done this, but in my mind, I prepared myself for, okay, jump in the Uber, grab a sandwich in the lobby, go up to my hotel room to finish stuff for the morning, right? I got on the Uber and I called a friend of mine and said, hey man, I have a free night in SF. You want to have dinner? And it was really great to feel ahead of my day instead of behind my day. Later, Mr. Puri discovers, oh, that was a flow state, aided by the fact that no Wi-Fi meant there were no incoming emails or SMS or WhatsApps. You know what I mean? There was no watching a YouTube video. It really constrained me in a way where I was like, wow, I did everything I needed to do in like 2 hours and change. Now, just to be explicit, because I know, some amount of the audience are flow masters and they know all this, and some are probably wondering, it's in the zeitgeist. People are talking about flow states. What exactly is it? Do you want me to explain that for 30 seconds? Just kind of so
Yes,
yeah,
please.
okay. So there was a Hungarian American psychologist, this guy Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, spent a while learning how to pronounce it properly.
I'm so pleased you got the opportunity to say that, because every time I go to pronounce it, I say,
Yeah, I know. And actually, I met one of his relatives who had heard me
wow.
speak somewhere and came up, was like, actually, he's my uncle or something. I was like, small world. Anyway, back to the story. So he had a thesis. He said, there is something to the fact that high performers in different disciplines, like athletes, artists, scientists, inventors, when they go into the highly concentrated state where they do the thing that makes them famous, the thing we know them for, they describe the state in very similar ways, even though they're doing very different things. He's like, there's something there. So, like Prometheus, you want to go up, grab some fire from asbestos, come down to the rest of us and be like, hey guys, I figured out fire, And at the end of his research, he wrote a book called Flow, which is the seminal work on this. It is from whence to get the term flow state. And he said the greatest thing. He said, I chose this word because it was the most beautiful metaphor for what I found, which is we are all on the river paddling to move ourselves forward. But if you align your boat with the current, it carries you. You go further and faster. You have to understand that these high performers have figured that out and how to get in that state repeatedly. And he was very open about it. He said, a lot of the people I spoke to, they have their own name for it. They don't call it flow. They call it being in the zone. They call it, whatever it may be. There's a great Michael Jordan quote about when I'm in the zone, it's just me and the ball, which is his beautiful reductive way of saying distractions fall away. I'm not watching the stands. I'm not looking at the scoreboard. Truly, if I control this ball, what I do here today will be shown 30 years later on a highlight reel. The conditions that Mihai talked about is he said, this state seems to be one where time falls away. You're not watching the clock. You do your best work in a compressed amount of time. Distractions are not an issue. And he said, at the end, you often feel uplifted or a sense of joy as opposed to a sense of depletion. And now that I experienced it and then later understood what it was, I was like, oh my God, how do you make this more readily available? And thankfully in the, standing on shoulders of giants way, a number of people from the Kotlers and the Newports and the Nears that have picked out some portion of this and done deep research on like, okay, what is the neuroscience behind sound? How does sound help you fall into a flow state faster? Or what kind of feedback do you get that allows you to stay in to know what you're doing? Mihai said, one of the conditions precedent that helps is you need to not just be pouring energy into a black hole. You need to be able to review what you've done, to get some sense of feedback on what you've done in order to stay in this flow state. And I know this has been actually a really long answer, and I'll wrap it up for a moment and send the talking stick back to you in France. But that work, for me, it was a sense of, why didn't I know this in my 20s? Why didn't someone say, hey man, try this, because it's going to change your life fundamentally?
That was a brilliant explanation. And
Thanks.
for those people who are now desperately asking themselves, how do I get into this flow state? You may have also heard me use words on previous podcasts, things like supernatural time and deep intuition. Flow state is the best way of describing this. But we also talk about this, like the supernatural time experience you had, Stephen, on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
You lose that sense of time. And I deal with a lot of athletes, and they will often say, well, I'm in flow state when I'm out exercising.
Right.
And that's a key moment. If you can recognize that time has passed without you noticing, you're not consciously aware, but you've gone somewhere into your subconscious.
One of the biggest problems, sorry, you go.
No, carry on.
I was going to say, one of the biggest problems we encountered when we finally got the app right was that people, especially engineers in the community, said, I'm missing meetings. Like, I get so deep in what I'm doing, I have no sense of like, oh, it's 10 o'clock. I have my stand up. So we instituted, this is going to sound so rudimentary, but it's really helpful. We instituted a little slider, a little toggle where you could say, hey, remind me when I have a meeting. Give me like a 5-minute countdown so I can get out and like get back, because people were missing their stand-up meetings because they're like, I was in it.
It's amazing. Well, you don't want to come out of it. My
No.
question for people, of course, that say I can access flow state when I'm exercising is that's great. But if you're trying to produce work, you need to be at your desk or you need to have a pen in your hand or whatever it is.
Mhm.
I find for me the ultimate sense of patience when I'm striving, I can't get into flow state at all. When I'm allowing, there is the solution I've been looking for, and it appears
A
immediately. The
wonderful
writing happens.
distinction. Yes.
Yeah, and it's done. Stephen, if I'm going to ask you the question now, which I think is on everybody's heart,
Yes, they're
tell me
real. Everyone asks.
how do I get into flow state? Tell me what you would.
Okay, so there are a number of things, and this is not meant to be a one size fits all kind of recipe, right? But happily, and by the way, anything intelligent I say on this pod, please let's attribute to the really smart people who spent their lives working on this, and I'm just here to try to, in a very reductive way, give some nuggets. Okay, let's be honest about that. So even using fMRIs to understand how does the brain change, like what happens to the prefrontal cortex as it sort of relaxes in like jazz music, for example, which is a very much a flow state, kind of like when you're in improvise. Wow, I speak the English real good. Improvisational jazz, to see how a jazz trio comes together and how their brains allow this sort of flow state to happen, you do see that there are different regions of the brain that are activated and different ones quiet. So let's speak out some things that research we did in order to build, the site that we did, which is music. There's a bunch of research that for most people, the sweet spot is music that is 60 to 90 beats per minute. Certain key signatures, non-vocal, you're not singing along with Blackpink or Wicked or whatever your thing is, right? Long melodic passages. Now, the outliers kind of, prove the rule, which is we all have the friend who listens to show tunes or Tchaikovsky or 90s gangster rap or whatever, and that's how they get into their groove, right? But that is not the middle of the road, right? So when we, for example, this is a lesson I learned, when we were putting together Sukha, I was like, I happen to have, guess what? A bunch of friends who are film composers with, guess what? A bunch of time on their hands, because film industry is not what it was, right? So it's like, hey guys, here's a set of guidelines. Could you write me like 1,000 hours of original music, kind of within these, guardrails? So we did, organized it into, more upbeat, down tempo, lo-fi playlists, things like that. So we had a whole bunch of like scientifically researched design music, right? Like Brain FM's really good, Andel's really good. There are a bunch of platforms that are good for music. And I'll tell you a funny thing happened. A buddy of mine up in Marin, Julian, who does the sound for a lot of the LucasArts, the Star Wars games, he called me up. He said, hey man, I just got back from Nepal because my kid, my son just graduated from high school, got into a great college. And I was like, what do you want as a graduation present? He said, I want to go to Nepal. So he said, I just got back. Weirdest thing. One day we're in Kathmandu. It rained so hard we couldn't leave. It was just pouring rain, but it was this delicious lush rain. And I had some of my sound equipment there, so I recorded like 2 hours of it. I don't know what to do with it. Do you want it? I know you're doing that Flow State app, right? So I was like, hey, for the price of free, absolutely, let's try it. So we just quietly added a playlist in the list of playlists called Himalayan Dream Rain. That is just a 2-hour loop of this rain in Nepal that Julian recorded. Without promotion, it became the 3rd most popular playlist in the app. Okay, that kind of took me by surprise. After all this like custom music we wrote, The Sound of Rain. So I reached out. I mean, being a founder, I know people's emails. I reached out to a couple people. Would you chat for a moment? Because I noticed you're listening to a lot of rain while you work, right? A couple people said the same thing to me, where I was like, why do you choose rain over this fabulous, film composer music? When I was a kid, I lived with my grandma in Georgia. And around the time I'd be studying for finals, it was always pouring rain, and it just evokes that in me. Or there was a lake house we would go to where it would rain. And it was interesting that for people, it was a trigger. It was a touchstone of the rain means I'm inside doing my work. And it goes back to like a childhood sort of trigger. I thought that was fascinating.
It's great, isn't it? So we've got music that helps us get into flow state.
Yes. So sound, I'm going to say the whole oral environment, find what you want. We've experimented with streams, surf, birds, like a lot of different things, including white noise, pink noise, brown noise, if you guys have ever played with that. So there is that, right? Also, you can't multitask, which was a very popular idea in like the 90s or the 2000s. High performers can juggle all these things, spin all these plates, and then later it was like, well, that's actually just monotasking where you're burning brain energy, context switching. So now it's not quite the thing. To encourage, monotasking, what we did is we kind of like highlight what you're working on as you work. So as you look up, you get more points, you get more juice for staying on something and finishing it rather than chipping away at a whole bunch of things. As a matter of fact, when you're in a session in our app, we hide everything on your to-do list except the top 3 things, because it's not realistic. You're going to do 7 things in a session. It's a huge achievement to do 3. So we just say like, hey man, just focus on these 3. It's doable. Go. I don't know. You and I think both have that morning clarity. So for me, that's 7 to 9, 7 to 10. That's a sacred time for me to be like, let's go monotask and knock out this thing sequentially, this thing, this thing. So those are important. Blocking distractions, which we've talked about. Now, if you have massive discipline, you can do that on your own. If you want some help, there are fantastic ways to do that. There are some apps that simply block websites entirely. You can't even open, I don't know, Facebook, YouTube, whatever your vice is, right? We chose the route of rather, you can have the option of a little pop-up. So if you do open Facebook, you just get a modal that says, is this helping you? And again, you get to choose, We felt that was a little more adult, respectful than like, we've blocked this like you're an addict. Even though I do know you're addicted to Instagram, and that's totally cool, Lindsay, no judgments. So, by the way, how's the sourdough recipe? Good? Good.
Amazing. Okay. My sourdough.
Right, that starter. Ooh, it made it through the pandemic.
Here, I might not be the best chef in the world, but every time I prepare something, I say, well done. You are great at this. Nobody's dead.
Affirmations.
Why would you not? Celebrate yourself.
I love that. We're usually so hard on ourselves.
Well, Stephen, the thing is, the way you talk to yourself is ultimately the way you talk to everybody, whether it's overt or not. And this is something I pick people up on all the time. And I wonder if your community have tweaked with this. We must celebrate success. Well done for completing those tasks. Does the app reward that? Because we do need some cheerleaders of ourselves out there.
Oh, yeah. Lindsay, I wish you'd met years ago. Yeah. When you finish a task in our platform, you mark it as completed. And one time a day, like your most important task, one time a day, you can post it to the group chat just with a button that says, do you want to share this? And inspire other people. Hey, man, I wrote a new blog post. Because when that goes in the group chat, like Stephen finished his new blog post in an hour and 40 minutes, all right? People will ask, they're like, hey, man, post a URL to it. Like, let's read what you wrote. And it's kind of fun being part of a community of people. It's like being part of a running community or a tennis community or whatever it is, or skiing in the Alps, wherever you are, right? Where it's like, we're doing this together. Let's go,
And if you're a highly competitive high performer, you want to win. So when you see somebody else has done their blog post, you think, right, I'm going to do mine. In the same way, I go and I ride my bike. I get quicker because I want to keep up with certain people. I mean, it's really about shame. I'm only riding fast.
Reason I do competitive yoga, because yoga is about winning. That is one of the core principles, and they hide that from you for a long time until you're a yoga master.
So right. I do feel like hypermobile people, though, have an advantage by birth. Would you agree with me?
I don't know, because I'll tell you this. My youth was squandered on mathematics, writing, things like that. It was not spent on football, basketball, baseball, like name all the American sports, right? A little bit of tennis, a little bit of golf, but not the mainstream sports, not soccer. I sucked at those, right? However, sorry?
Yes. No, carry on, please.
I was just going to say, however, I discovered yoga in the strangest way. Ex-girlfriend of mine, before Laura, my wife, who's actually a good friend of Laura's, she was the director of marketing for YogaWorks, which was a large chain in the United States, right? So as a girlfriend does, she gave me a yoga mat, gave me a little free class card and said, hey, try, I'm working here. I'm running the national marketing for these guys. Why don't you try it? And I did. I did the 8 classes, 12 classes, whatever's on the card. And I did not wake up the next morning and go, man, I need to go buy another class pass. Cut to a year later, I was in India with my dad and some family friends, randomly in this national park. There's a forest called Ranthambore, which is famous because that's where the Royal Bengal Tiger Preserve is. And the hotel we're staying, there's this beautiful Oberoi that's in the park. I was walking down one of the little flagstone paths in the middle of nowhere, and I saw a guy who was going to lead a yoga class, just an Indian guy sitting in a white dhoti in the middle of an empty clearing alone. I went up to him. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I lead a yoga practice, which was kind of hilarious because he's standing in a clearing alone in a forest, right? I was like, when do you do this? He's like, in the afternoon. So I went to lunch with family friends, tried to rally some support. They were all like, oh, that's so cute. You go do yoga. We're good. Like, we're Indian. We've done enough yoga. And I was like, it's kind of cool. I went back. He did. He and there's a very tall German guy with a beautiful DSLR camera. We did yoga in the forest. At the end of that, I wanted to call Allison and say, I was not ready for the gift you tried to give me a couple years ago. But today I understand. Maybe daily yoga practice since that day. So that is not a story of how I'm a amazingly physical adept person, but it was rather when that moment came, I decided I want to be really good at this.
I love the way you've just said, I wasn't ready for the gift, because we are living in such abundant times materially. And I think maybe we just weren't ready to receive this many gifts and we're not acknowledging them. I want to ask you a question as we're coming towards the end of our conversation, I know, about living legacy vision, because this is really important in terms of purpose, motivation, and also countering burnout. Stephen, if your future family were gathered in a warm and purposeful space years from now, what story or value would you most want them to carry forwards in the world?
You know that little monologue by Iago in Othello, where he talks about, good name in man and woman, because he made a jewel of their souls, that sort of thing. I would impress upon them that the world they live in is very hard because every mistake that they make is recorded now and will live indefinitely, right? That was not true of your and my generation. I did some stupid stuff where people were not all posting it on Instagram and TikTok, and I was able to make those mistakes in college. That will not be true for them. So I know the bar is higher for them to lead a life where I want them to make mistakes because you learn, assuming no one's dead, right? Mistake where you kill someone, debatable whether it was worth it, right? But I mean, you do make mistakes and you do get hurt and you do hurt others and you learn from that about who you are and who you want to be. I would very much want to impress upon them that sense of, hey man, your reputation is all you really have. Like, you carry with you the memories of everything you've done. It lives inside you. It'll make you feel a certain way. Don't try and be a monk who touches nothing, doesn't tread on a blade of grass for fear of killing. Don't live that way, but live in a way where you are proud of what you've done. You affected people's lives in such a way that when you leave, they do say, it's better for her or him to have been here. And I think that's really hard in this day and age of every mistake haunts me forever. Let's be honest.
Of course they won't. They will help people. And I really want to urge people to dig into understanding more about Flow State, your community, and the way that we can support ourselves, because we're living in really complex, changing times. And it is not easy to focus, to remember why you're here, and make an impact with your own life and leave.
Beautiful way to draw all this all together.
Stephen, this has been a great conversation. I wasn't sure where it was going to go when we started talking and planning.
As the best ones are. Yeah.
I know.
You don't know where
And
they
I'm
go.
also really keen for you to tell people, if they want to join the community, how do they go about it and what can they expect?
Well, that's very sweet of you to say. I will offer two things. If there's anything I've said where someone wants to know more, like, hey, the Newport guy you talked about, or Mihai, my email address is very public. You can email me with a question. I'll email you back a blog post or something to learn about. It is Stephen, Steven, not PH. I'm not cool that way, at thesukha, TheSukha.co. Sukha means like happiness in Sanskrit. So thesukha. And if someone wants to experiment with getting into a flow state, come say hi, join, go to the website. It's very simple. It's just a browser-based app at thesukha, TheSukha.co. And drop in the group chat. Say hello. Say, hey, I heard you on Lindsay's podcast, and I'm experimenting with doing more with my life and being more focused. Be cool.
Amazing. And I also would urge people to remember that you don't need to be focused all the time, because actually over-focusing kills any chance of flow state.
Right.
There's this space in the middle, that liminal space where everything happens. And you can't park your car if you're driving at 100 miles an hour down the motorway or the freeway. You have got to slow down to smell the roses, open the window, change direction, and more importantly, park at the end of the day.
Mixing the metaphors. Wow, that was powerful.
Take a moment. Stephen, until next time, I will make sure that we link the books that we've talked about down below,
Awesome.
the work of Jamie and Stephen Kotler as well. Well, I'll link that because it's a great book. I started on that many years ago,
Sure,
and I
yeah.
enjoyed every moment of it. And also your website and your email address. Anything else to add before we close for
I
today?
would say thank you for this conversation, Lindsay, and thank you to anyone who's listening at this point and has given us your time. Time is precious. Really appreciate that.
Until next time, take care.